So you have the gift of choosing what goes into your body, and you will get better at choosing the more you actually do it. We spend a lot of time talking about and navigating the pressure and awkwardness of social situations. We talk a lot in particular about pushing or food pushing. If a person pushes food, it essentially means that if somebody offers you food and then you decline, you reject their offer, and then they offer again. At this point, the offer now turns into pushing with the way that we operationalize food pushing. It has to do with continuous offers despite rejection. But we often act as accomplices. We often act as accomplices by hoping or even baiting people into offering things just so that we can accept it. So it sounds weird to go off plan on purpose if you bring it up that way, but it also sounds acceptable to accept a person's gifts, affection, hospitality, etc. And so this creates a conundrum because biology keeps the score either way. In effect, intentions mean almost nothing because biology just keeps track of biology. So getting food or anything for that matter pushed on us happens as a daily occurrence.
That's true.
We have experienced many a situation where a person offers us something and we say, no, thank you. And instead of moving on with their lives, they offer it again, and sometimes again and again. Now, if we get offered something and reject the offer and they continue offering, that has now turned into pushing. Some people push because they want to share a good experience with you. I only offer if it tastes good. Some people only offer if it tastes or smells bad, etc., etc. Other people push because they want you to like them, or they have a fear of rejection, or both. Some minority in your life may just have designs to sabotage you, and yet others push, well, because previous experiences taught them that people will reject offers out of politeness. Ever seen that comic that has Canadian Standoff at the top of the page, where it has Canadians on either side of the door, and one has the door open and they go, after you, and he goes, no, after you, after you, after you. They call it Canadian Standoff, and it lasts forever, and they both die there because neither walks through the door out of politeness. Others push because in previous experiences, they got taught or it's shaped that people will reject offers out of politeness, therefore insisting makes it easier for the other person to accept when they reject out of politeness. And today we kind of talk about that rather fuzzy area, the so-called, in this case, the Canadian standoff. Now, in some situations, this occurs because accepting gifts from people can get labeled as rude.
How rude!
A lot of times, accepting gifts from people can get labeled as rude. And this happens mostly because of idiomatic phrases we use as part of a daily conversation. I'll give you an example. If you say, wow, what a wonderful dinner, thank you so much, and the host says, of course, come back anytime. Well, if you show up 2 days later at 2:30 in the morning expecting a casserole, then their original hospitable disposition may do a 180 and turn downright hostile. And what led to what? Who acts rude in this situation? The person that reneges their offer to show up anytime, or the person that shows up anytime?
Why are you here?
In this instance, a cursory survey indicates the person showing up in the middle of the night gets the rude label.
It's midnight and you show up here like this crazy stalker person.
Did they actually make an offer by saying come back anytime? No. They made a face noise to terminate a social interaction, also known as politeness. In other words, we make public offers to people while making private demands that they decline it. And since we've experienced this and we've done it, it puts pushing into a little bit of a different perspective. We have enough experiences with fake offers that it managed to shape the behavior of insisting, for instance. Because when we insist, that makes the offer go from doing it out of politeness to an actual real offer. As if you say it once, you do it out of politeness, and other people then reject it out of politeness. And if you start pushing, then no, I really meant to make an offer instead of just doing it politely. Social scientists tend to call interpersonal actions nuanced and complex and confounding with a constellation of variables. This just looks like giving people permission to lie or bully and still call it polite. Yet the humans persist. In some instances, we engineer situations or put ourselves into situations where we know a person will offer something just so that we can take them up on the offer. And this level of, social ingenuity takes the idea of pushing and flips it on its head. It turns it into pulling instead of pushing. So Michelle, a rather passive and benign looking woman, mastered the art of accepting the offer from people. So with a background in corporate sales, which thrived on things like professionalism, whatever the hell that means, she learned some tricks of the trade. And a lot of these tricks come down to engineering a conversation to make it look like their idea, she said. Then, instead of you making an offer to them and selling them, they make an an offer to buy. She explained it this way. And this makes you the good guy instead of the salesperson or whatever. You do what they ask, and that makes you a good guy instead of a salesman, I guess. So when I learned this, she said, I started getting a lot more of what I wanted. And I also started getting a lot more of what I hated. We'll get into that in a little bit. See, Michelle, she started out healthy, her parents called her healthy sized. And somewhere along the line that turned into a euphemism for fat. She exasperated. And it ticked up and up and up as she grew. Okay, her body weight grew and grew, went to college, got married, etc. And as an interesting aside, I point this out for a reason, Michelle cared very little about her body weight per se because she had very good, she called it self-confidence.
It's about confidence.
To her, she won whenever a person offered her something she wanted and accepted it. Fair enough, fair enough. But a trip to the physician, specifically the obstetrician or baby doctor, pregnant lady doctor, pregnant doctor, whatever you want to call it, changed her tune a bit. In short, she wanted to have a baby, and I caught on to the physician's body language, more of this like hidden language type stuff, okay? Michelle said, I forgot exactly what she said, but she spent 5 minutes calling me too fat to have a baby without actually telling me I was too fat to have a baby. Interesting. See, Arthur and I, her husband, have tried to have a baby for almost 2 years now, and he checked out fine. So I went in looking for more information about fertility stuff, and I got yes node all over the place. And as an aside, I eventually learned to her that yes node meant yeah but. Okay. The doctor could do fertility stuff, but I would have a better chance with a lower BMI, body mass index, the relationship between your height and your weight. The doctor could look into regulating my hormones, but I could regulate my insulin with diet, etc., etc. Anyway, lots of this doctor talk that basically ended with get skinny and then come back. To which Dr. Kashey replies in this conversation, well, you seem business oriented enough about this. You already know the calculus. What problem do you want to solve? Because she acted so matter of fact about all these things. You already know the answer. What the hell do you want me for? And Michelle said one of the most insightful things I've ever heard a distressed person in her situation say. Accepting what other people offer on purpose and giving in to what other people want have turned into the same thing. She said, I feel like a drug dealer that uses his own stash, thinking he's immune to getting addicted just because he slings it. And then one day his shipment gets delayed and he has a panic attack. Not because he would make less money, but because he would have to wait before he could use again. I went, geez, that sounds personal. She stiffened up and said, yes, but that's neither here nor there. So I said, okay, so what do you want from me? What do you want from me? She said, I spent my whole life selling other people on things. I've lost the ability to sell myself. I feel like that drug dealer that got drop kicked by reality. I've used my own stash for so long that I've gotten weak. And I said, put the weak shit aside, which explains nothing, frankly, and tell me what you mean. She says, well, I ask a prospect about their problems so that they will ask me to tell them more about the product. I go to bars just so people would offer me drinks. I take a small portion just so people would ask if I wanted more. I would hold my head and grimace just so somebody would offer me aspirin. I started talking about moving to places with better schools and crime rates just to get Arthur to ask about having babies. And she started kind of spiraling. So I frankly interrupted. I do that a lot. I say, saying yes to others has interfered with you saying yes to yourself. Saying yes to others has interfered with her saying yes to herself. She goes, yeah, something like that. I used to think I was getting people to ask so that I could get what I wanted. But now it's turned into them asking so they could get what they wanted. So they sold you. The seller got sold. So now I have to change and think about all these offers disappearing because of the baby. I feel like I either lost all the control I had or I never had control to begin with, which we will have an interesting aside about control in a moment. She says, you spend too much damn time talking about food pushers because I've spent my whole damn life food pulling. Now you know where it comes from. Michelle the genius. She spent her life pulling food from people, so to speak. So onto this control thing. What happens now? It brings up an interesting question in regard to assertiveness, which we define more or less as staying true to what you want and respecting all parties involved. And here's the rub. People only ever talk about assertiveness with other people, and assertiveness really comes from acting assertive with yourself. In reality, Michelle had adapted, like we spoke about earlier, like any intelligent person does, to her social and corporate environment, and those adaptations that helped her there conflicted with her other environments at home, conflicted with her health, conflicted with the family she wanted to start. So does Michelle really get others to offer her food, or do others really get Michelle to accept what they offer? And we can answer that question with another question. Does it even matter? Does it even matter? You get the same outcome either way. And to give you a more realistic answer, you can only ever know when the situations play out over and over like this one. Can you know in any given instance? No. If you see this happen many times, well, then you get an idea. And it speaks to the fickle nature of control in general. Feelings of control really just come as a function of outcomes. In reality, humans feel like they have control over situations when they get results they like. The more often you get results you like, the stronger the feelings of control you have over a situation. So the more often they get results they like, the more in control they feel. But does getting results you like have a functional relationship with actual control? I'll ask it in another way. Does the scientist train the rat to press a lever and the rat gets a food pellet as a reward? Or does the rat train the scientist to give a food pellet and they press the lever to reward the scientist? Yes, they train each other. So social and environmental stimuli have a damn big effect on how we behave, and we can do almost nothing at the time the stimulus presents itself. At the time, we can do almost nothing. We have to rely on the other skills and experiences we've had. We can, though, look at the variables in our interactions with others and the environment at large and make some modifications. This way, if we change the environment, we end up changing the sort of stimuli we get. For instance, in Michelle's case, if she calls ahead before she goes to a friend's house and says, "Hey, I'll skip dessert this time," then she alters the probability of the person offering her dessert. So she made a modification for the environment and therefore changed the sort of stimuli she would get, which then she can respond as normal to the alternative stimulus. In addition, we can change the way that we respond the next time a stimulus presents itself. So this has to do with what people would call learning from experience. It means looking at previous situations, seeing the outcome, assessing the variables in the environment, and then essentially building a skill like respectful repetition. Thank you so much for asking. I feel good right now. Thank you so much for asking. I feel good right now. Literally just repeating it over and over and over. Really functional way to respond to a lot of food pushing activities. Sometimes people push food on us, and other times we pull food from them. But does this always have to do with food? No, it happens with all sorts of stuff. So you will look at the stimulus, the response, and the outcome of these food pushing and pulling conversations from the perspective of the other person. In other words, what this looked like for them, okay, and how you engineered it to happen. So write a short narrative about a time you engineered a situation so that a person offered something to you that you wanted, food or not, but also managed to avoid outright asking for it. And then do a simple analysis of the stimulus, the response, and the outcome for the other person instead of you. Normally, we focus on the SRO model for ourselves. In this instance, we put on a guessing hat. Yes, we guess. We can only form opinions here. So be it. Okay, that we will assume a stimulus and a response and an outcome for how we interacted with that other person. So you've gotten experience looking at the SRO model for yourself. What stimulated me? How did I respond to that? What outcome did I get from that response? And now you can look at it from somebody else. How did Michelle stimulate me? How did I respond to Michelle's stimulus? What did I get? What happened? And then how does that affect how Michelle stimulates me next time? Strange conversation. However, I'll stick with it. Okay. So how did you do this bit of behavioral engineering? How did you get a person to ask you for something that you wanted? Or how did you get a person to offer you something that you wanted without asking? And considering that you have done it before, considering that you have engineered situations like this, you have gotten a person to offer you something before asking for it. Since you did engineer that, how else can you engineer a situation next time? Okay. Because you can and you do influence how other people behave around you. You already do. So instead of doing it on accident, you may as well do it on purpose. So what happened with Michelle? So I left out how much she weighed and how much she lost and how much her blood work changed, because those things just happened as a side effect of the main outcome, having a baby. In this instance, I consider the main outcome, having a baby, and all these other things as a side effect, right, of turning into the sort of person it takes to have a baby for her. So we talk a lot about food pushing and the like, but we can also do quite a bit of food pulling. In short, this really means it takes two to tango. Do they contribute? Absolutely. Do you contribute? Absolutely. Do I contribute? Absolutely. Which do we have more influence over? Their contribution or our contribution? And I ask somewhat of a loaded question here, because the way we act changes how they act. In other words, they contribute and we contribute, but the way that we act affects their contribution. So in short, this means we have a massive amount of influence, and it just depends on whether we influence on accident or influence on purpose. In other words, again, it takes two to tango, and you can take the lead. So step back a bit and breathe and take a legitimate look, observe the facts and how these situations play out and how you contribute to them and how they contribute to them and how you contribute to their contribution. Sounds kind of meta, but it works that way. Remember that nuanced and fancy interrelated stuff. Would you have broken the vase if she said, don't mind the vase, and you turned over and whacked it with your elbow? Little matrix thing going on there. Same sort of stuff. So you have the gift of choosing what goes into your body, and you will get better at choosing the more you actually do it. Thank you so much for learning. Stay rational. And until next time, Dr. Kashey out.